Hi, I'm Chad Lewis with Canyon Ranch Institute. Canyon Ranch Institute is a nonprofit organization that takes the best practices in health and wellness from Canyon Ranch and delivers them to low-income communities throughout the world. One of the ways that we do that is through gardening programs, specifically in urban areas. In an urban area, you may have limited space that you're working with, such as a balcony or a patio. A perfect way to still be able to garden in limited space is by using a pallet. They make great kitchen gardens and they can be used for decoration as well. Today I'd like to show you how to make one. Most cities have pallet recycling centers where you can find like-new pallets such as these relatively inexpensively, usually for around $5 to $10 at most. One of the things that you want to look for when selecting a pallet is making sure that it has the proper stamps, which identify how the pallet has been treated in the past. What you want to look for is something that says HT, meaning heat treated. That means the pallet was just ran through an oven and heated in order to kill any pests or microbes that may have been on it before transportation. One of the things that you definitely want to stay away from is a stamp saying MB, which stands for methyl bromide. That's a carcinogenic chemical that you do not want anywhere near anything you're going to be growing for your kitchen. Another thing to look for is to make sure that there are no stains on the pallet, such as oil, chemicals, any type of food residue, animal or bird droppings. Basically any stains that you think may be questionable and it's something that you don't want in your food, then stay away from it. Now that you've found your perfect pallet, you're going to need to prep it. In order to do so, there's some tools of the trade that you'll need. For one, a crowbar or utility bar of some sort in order to pry up slats. A hammer to help you out with that, to hammer down any rusty nails or pry out any nails that may come out. Also, in order to attach the landscape fabric, which will be in our next step, I prefer to use a hammer stapler, but any stapler may do. You'll also need a utility knife to cut the landscape fabric after you're done measuring it out. If you have any large splinters or rough edges that you'd like to knock down, some sandpaper is always a good idea to have on standby as well. For a first step, you want to look at the slat spacing on whichever pallet you select. It's always good to get one with at least 4 inches of clearance if you can, but sometimes you may find the right pallet, but you need to move around the slats in order to make it work. So with these, I used my utility bar and hammer to knock up a few of the slats in order to get the right spacing. As you can see here, I really just needed to knock out the two that are closest to the top and closest to the bottom, and I can space them out in order to give myself quite a bit of room to plant in here. Now that we've moved our slats, the next step will be applying the landscape fabric. Landscape fabric can be found at any home improvement store. Usually you can find it at garden supply stores and things like that. What you want to look for is making sure that you're getting at least 3 feet wide and 50 feet long. That'll do about 2 pallets. Also, when you're selecting your pallet, try to find a 36-inch wide pallet. It's a non-standard size, but it makes it really easy because the landscape fabric's the exact same size when you're rolling it on. You want to start at whatever the bottom of your pallet's going to be. So you're going to lay it across the top edge. Don't worry about making it too pretty here because we're going to come back on a second round and make it look nice. Take your hammer stapler, start pinning the edge down, just like that. Now that we've got our top edge pinned down, we're going to want to pick up the pallet and flip it over while you hold on to your landscaping fabric so you don't tear it. And gently roll the landscaping fabric down the whole backside of the pallet, all the way to the top. And just let it hang over. Don't cut it off yet because you want to use long, continuous pieces as we go back and forth along the backside. All right. So one of the things you want to be careful with when you're hammering the backside down is watching out for these areas here where the forklift will pull up under the pallet. Those little gaps will tear your fabric once you have it pulled tightly if you try to hammer into there. So just find the slats on the back side and hammer into those. Don't worry about hammering into these gaps here. Once you've pinned down the sides and you reach the top of the pallet, you want to give it a little stretch to make sure you take all the wrinkles out and hammer all the way down the top edge. That's going to be the edge that you use to fold back over the staples. So try to get as close to the edge as possible. Now that you have your edge tacked with staples, we're going to fold back over that towards the front again. And just let the roll unroll itself as you go down. Try to maintain the same lines that you did on the way up, and then just tack it down again in the same place as you tack the first layer. At this point, you may not be able to see through the fabric, so it's good to feel the edge before you staple it, because like I was mentioning before, this gap area here, if you've got it pulled tight and you hit in there, you're going to tear through your fabric and have to start over again. So it's always good to feel first before you hit. Now that we've finished stapling the back of the pallet and flipped it over, we're ready to cut our landscape fabric and make our final fold and tack. Once you have your continuous piece of fabric pulled tightly, you want to give yourself a little bit of extra slack that you can fold back over and make it look nice and neat. So I say cut about an extra inch or two of fabric away from the end of the slat that you stapled on the first pass. So start making your cut right around here. Now that we've made our cut, we're going to want to fold that back and give ourselves a nice clean edge right on the end of that slat right there. And go ahead and staple it down. Just refolding and making sure everything looks good as you go. And keeping the wrinkles stretched out towards the end of the pallet. So just like we did when we wrapped the landscape fabric vertically, now we're going to need to do the same thing horizontally. So since it's a 3-foot roll, you're going to need to do one layer towards the top and another layer overlapping that towards the bottom. Same way, we're going to do 2 folds, coming one across, pinning it down, and folding it back and cutting it off on the opposite side. Now that we have everything tacked down on the sides, we need to go across the back slats and make sure that we tack them down there too, so they can hold up to the weight of the soil once you stand the pallet up. So in order to do that, just like we were doing before, you want to feel around to make sure that you know the width of the slat, and just put a couple rows of staples all the way across on each of them. On this pallet, we've got 3 slats, but sometimes you may have 5. It all depends on the pallet. And now that we have our landscape fabric attached to the pallet, the next step is placing the soil in. You want to start with the pallet propped up at an angle by placing a rock or something under it to make the soil fall towards the bottom. That way, you work your way from the bottom to the top, packing in the soil as you add plants. You want to make sure to always use a potting mix and not garden soil, because garden soil traps too much moisture in and it's a little bit too heavy for containers. So make sure you go with something like this, outdoor potting mix. We're going to start by just letting a whole bag fall in, and we just kind of help it along down into the bottom of the pallet. As the pallet starts to fill in, you want to make sure to pack a lot of that soil down in there with your hands. Don't be afraid to reach in there. Now that we've got most of our soil into the pallet, we're ready to start planting. Today I've chosen a couple of different varieties of basil to put in, but pretty much any plant will work in a pallet as long as it doesn't need too much root depth. So you want to stay away from root crops like carrots, and also plants that take longer time to mature usually don't do as well in a pallet, but they're perfect for herbs and any type of leafy greens. So let's go ahead and start planting these in. You want to make sure to plant at a height where the soil is not going to go above the root ball here. And the way to do that is to make sure that you're packing in from above as you're putting it in. So just hold the plant about the height you want to get it in there and start packing around it from the slat above, making sure you really compact that soil in there well. This is where having that nice large clearance comes into play, where you want at least 4 inches in order to fit a nice plant in there. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now that we have that planted, we're going to move up to the next slat, and you're going to keep doing that all the way up. Some things to think about when you're choosing plants for a pallet is the season and how large the plant's going to get as well. Some good resources can be found online by searching on Google for square foot gardening, and those will explain the different sizes that you need for certain types of plants. Herbs and leafy greens are perfect for pallet gardens, so that's what we tend to plant most of the time on these. And you can work your way up from the bottom to the top as long as you stay on one side, because there's a beam in the middle that separates these into 2 different planters. One thing that you need to keep in mind once you're done planting is that the pallet is going to need to lay flat for about a week or 2 in order to let the roots settle enough before you stand it up. Also, you want to give it a nice good watering just to alleviate some of the transplant shock on the plants. Let them settle into their new home nicely. Just like any other container, pallet gardens may need more water than plants that you would place directly in the soil. So keep that in mind, especially during hot seasons, that you may need to water a pallet up to twice a day. Now we have all of our plants in. This is pretty much our final product. You want to remember to leave it in a prone position for about 1 or 2 weeks to let those roots settle. It's okay if you leave that rock in there propping it up, so that way when you water it, the water will just flow down throughout the whole pallet. After a few weeks, this is the final product that you can look forward to. Be creative with the plants that you select. As you can see here, we've got a multitude of different things growing. There's crimson sweet watermelon in the base, Greek oregano, some rosemary. We've got a few different peppers here, some banana peppers, garden salsa, a basil variety coming out of the top, and also to repel insects, we've companion planted English lavender. So be creative. One thing to take away is gardening is not just about growing beautiful flowers and vegetables, but also being one with nature and taking advantage of the therapeutic benefit it offers. If you'd like more information about Canyon Ranch Institute, please visit www.canyonranchinstitute.org.